Now we're going to start looking at how to make gravy. And making gravy is very easy. It is liquid, fat, and flour. And for this gravy, we're going to be using chicken stock, butter. This is 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 cups of chicken stock, which I will talk about in a moment. We have a quarter of a lemon, and we also have some salt in case we need it. But this chicken stock is already very salty, so we might not need the salt. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a roux. And a roux is a combination of fat and flour. Now, if we wanted to, we could use the fat that comes off of our chicken and some of that liquid to also add to what we're doing. In this case, we're not going to be doing that, but that is an option. Now, when we talk about roux, the general formula is 1 tablespoon of flour, 1 tablespoon of butter, and 1 cup of liquid. So it's 1, 1, 1. In this case, we're making 2 cups, so we're using 2, 2, and 2. Now, when we will talk about this more during the cooking portion, but we always want to add cold liquid to hot roux or cold roux to hot liquid. And the reason is the way that it thickens. So these are the ingredients that we're going to be using, and it's going to be good gravy. Now, the equipment that we're going to be using for the gravy is actually very simple. We have our pan and we have our whisk. And this is a saucepan. And one of the reasons that we know it's a saucepan is because of the curved edges here. It helps the whisk get into all of those different edges so that we can fully mix things. Because when we add the flour and the butter, they can get stuck in the corners of pans. So if you have a pan where the edges go straight up, you might have to get a little bit more in there. But that is the equipment for our gravy. To make our gravy, it is actually, once you get the process down, it is a very simple procedure, and this is actually the start of many, many, many different sauces. And what we are going to start with is we are going to start with the roux. So first, we're going to turn our pan onto medium heat, and we are going to add our butter. And what we are going to do is we are going to wait for this butter to melt, and then we are going to add our flour. So I'm going to take a step back here. We're going to, again, wait for this to melt, and then continue. Okay, so our butter is melted, and now you can still kind of see it frothing and everything there. What we are going to do is we're going to slowly start adding our flour in. So we're going to sprinkle some in, and stir it around. And we want to make sure that there's no clumps. And you're going to start seeing this thicken very, very quickly. Add a little bit more. And keep stirring. And you're going to start smelling that flour and butter. And it really is a very unique smell. So we have all that. Add a little bit more. There we go. And just stir it, make sure there's no lumps. When people make lumpy gravy, this is usually a reason why, is it was not being stirred enough. So just going to keep stirring that. And the last bit of our flour there. Okay, now what we are going to do, once this is finished being stirred, there we go, is we're going to leave this for a few moments just to allow that taste of the flour to cook out. And we're going to come back in about a minute or two and take a look at that. Now, at this point, one thing I'd like to mention is that there are different kinds of roux. And what we are making here is called a blonde roux. And they get progressively darker after that. The lighter your roux is, the more thickening power it will have. If you're doing something like gumbo, for example, gumbo is all about getting that roux the right color. For those darker roux, all we would do is allow this to cook more and to brown up. But that's not what we're looking for today. We want to keep this a very light color. So we're going to leave this for a few moments, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start adding our chicken stock. Okay, so this has started to cook, and you can see, and I did this on purpose, it's gotten a little bit darker. So as we cook it more, the darker it gets. Now what we're going to be doing is very slowly adding cold chicken stock. We add a little, stir it up, and you see it starts to really start clumping. So we're going to add a little more, stir some more. A little bit more, and keep stirring. And before we add more, we always want to make sure that it's not lumpy. We want it to be very smooth. So add a little bit more, and we'll keep stirring. And you see how this is really starting to, it got really thick, and now it's starting to thin out. So add some more. And again, we want to stir, make sure all of those lumps are out. There we go. And we'll add a little bit more. And just keep stirring. And you might find that you don't use all of your chicken stock. And if you don't, that's okay. I'll show you how we can test if our gravy is at the right thickness. So, to test that, what we would do is we're going to take a spoon and we're going to just dip the spoon in and flip it over, and we're going to look at how it coats the back of the spoon. And we can still see lumps in there, so it needs more stirring. But thickness-wise, we can add maybe a little bit more to it. Okay, so just a little bit more. And we're just going to keep stirring. There we go. Now, as this cools off, it will get thicker. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. So we want to make it a little bit thinner than what we want, so that as it's cooling, it's going to thicken up for us. So we're going to add a little bit more here. There we go. Make sure all of those lumps are out. There we go. Now we're going to test it with our spoon again. So dip it in, flip it over. And at this point we can also start tasting it. That's really, really good. Very chickeny. And like I said before in one of the earlier videos, if you have the fat from your chicken, if you have some of the liquid that dripped off your chicken, you can use that instead of butter also to give it even more of a chicken taste. We're going to stir this up. And a little bit more. There we go. Because remember, we want it thinner than what we're looking for. So we're just going to look at that. There we go. And it's coating the back of that spoon very nicely. Okay. So the last step for this is we're actually going to take our lemon and we're just going to squeeze a little bit of that lemon juice right in there, just to give it that little bit of acid. And we're going to stir that in. And we're going to now take a step back and we're just going to let this kind of sit and not come to a full boil, but just start to boil. So we will let that sit for a few moments and we will be back. Okay, so this has been boiling for a little bit here. We're going to stir it up a little more. Like I said, just make sure that there's no chunks. We don't want lumps in our gravy. And as you can see, it's continued to thicken. So again, we'll take our spoon, coat the back of the spoon. There we go, and give it a taste. That is really, really good. Okay, a little bit more. And I think that's going to be about it for this. So we're going to leave this. We're going to bring this up to a boil again. Not quite a boil, just that little simmer. And we're just going to let it sit there for a few seconds. And then we'll come back. Okay, so now our gravy is at the boil. Even while boiling, it's at a good consistency. I still have some chicken stock left. And one of the reasons is like I said, this is going to continue to thicken as it cools. If I need to, I can add more of this in and just stir and make sure that all the lumps are out if it gets too thick. But if you are serving this right away, this is exactly what we're looking for. And if you look at the way it just coats the back of that spoon, we can kind of see through it, but almost. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So this gravy is done. So this is ready to go. I'm going to put this over to the side here. And that's it.